Hello again, everyone. Kata Kosman, publisher of Madison's Lumber Reporter. Here I am. Once again, it is now after Labor Day, so we are into the second week of September, and we have lumber prices for the following the very important Labor Day long weekend in Canada and the US, which in historical has tended to mark the beginning of the slowdown seasonally for home building and for lumber sales and lumber prices. Of course, the last few years have not been normal following the historical trend, but the factors remain the same in terms of the weather, in terms of the housing starts, where the builders in general terms will order their wood a couple of months, at least 6 weeks, but usually longer in advance of their project, which means now already into the second week of September, they would be breaking ground at the end of October, which is not necessarily a great time to be beginning a new housing start, especially in Canada, but also in the Western United States. And so we do have lumber prices up compared to the bottom. If my regular viewers, or if you've looked at my previous videos, you will see that I was saying during the summer in July, I'm thinking that this is the bottom. And in fact, that is what happened on those benchmark Western Spruce KD 2x4 number 2 and better, bottomed out at US $330 per thousand board feet there in the middle of the summer, July, and have since been rising, and now we have 406. In comparison, that item, the Western Spruce 2x4, the low last year in 2023 was in March at 332. So people who have been watching my videos and reading the website, when I was saying we are never going to have $250 or $230 2x4 again, this is what I'm saying, because the cost of production has increased by that much in British Columbia, in Quebec, and in the United States. And so what prior to 2020 was the low is out of reach now. The cost of the timber, the cost of hauling the timber, and the cost of manufacturing the wood, which the highest charges to a mill are energy costs and staff. These are now much higher than they were prior to 2020, which means a mill can no longer sell 2x4s for $250. It will lose a lot of money. Previously, that was break even. So now we don't know what break even is just yet because the economics are still coming out, the data. But definitely, it looks like this 330 is as low as the mills can go and still be selling. And so now the announcements of all the curtailments, which really have been going on for almost a couple of years, I did some math. I started a new publication called The Curtailment Lookout a few years ago there at the beginning of 2022, I believe it was, to track monthly the downtime. And it includes, if there was a fire or something else happened, a job interruption. It doesn't necessarily only be sawmills taking curtailment or downtime. And so what I found is for January to August of this year, across North America, for the lumber manufacturing, the sawmill curtailment has added up to a decrease of 1,706 million board feet. So like almost 2 billion board feet have gone offline in North America in 2024, which comes out to a decrease of 6% from the total. When you look at it in the scope of the entirety of this year so far and covering the entire continent, meaning some of these downtime at some times was in the east, sometimes in the west, sometimes in the south. Okay, I am going to do another video right now. So this is basically part one, where I'm going to be doing my usual talking about the lumber market and the different products, the different prices, the different situations at the mill, the producers, with the secondary suppliers, the wholesalers and the reloads, and then what's going on with demand. Then I'm going to do immediately right now another video stemming from that, because the macroeconomic data, the other data sets which come out from the government, Statistics Canada, the US Census, the WTO, the US Trade Organization, telling you log, export, lumber, export and import across Canada, the US. There's also data from the Western Wood Products Association. They are excellent. They're based in Portland, Oregon, and do a monthly newsletter called Lumber Track, which tells you production volumes, Canada, US, East and West, and sawmill capacity utilization rates. Okay, so watch here as I'm going to show you the graphs and the table that I usually show you of the lumber prices, and give you the background information about what is happening with the market for lumber across North America right now at the into the middle of September 2024. So the first thing to notice here on this graph, which is the benchmark Western Spruce Pine Fir KD 2x4 number 2 and better price, is the scale that this 2-year rolling price history is coming to be working out the volatility that we saw during that crazy times 2021, and is now the top of the scale is 600. Okay, so that pink line, the ending days of 2022, as you can see, coming down to what we are now seeing as more normal levels. Then the yellow line is last year, 2023. And when you look at the blue line for this year, and you see going along quite flat, and then as I was saying, the drops that bottomed out in the middle of July at that low of US 330 per thousand board feet, is now coming back up and is quite a bit looking like it's meeting the line from last year, same week last year. So that tells us a lot in terms of what to expect going forward with a stability to prices. And now we're just going to see how this year continues in terms of the supply and demand balance. Into some more detail here, that top line is the graph you were just looking at, WSPF or Western Spruce Pine Fir. This week of September 6th at 406, up from the previous week and also up from the previous month. And then going down that list, Southern Yellow Pine on the east side, it's flat and only slightly up from the previous month. Those prices did rise up a little bit further than the market can bear and had to correct back down, but are now approximately within the range of their competitors. The third one being Eastern Spruce Pine Fir, coming out of Quebec and New York State, also flat and also slightly up over the previous month. And then you have the studs, WSPF standard studs for single-family construction framing, Douglas Fir Green, and of course panel, in which case here we've chosen Canadian softwood plywood coming out of Toronto, 9.5 millimeters or 3/8 inch. And so then here we have the same data that you were just looking at presented as a graph. And this is a 2-year rolling monthly average. Once again, take note of the scale. The top of that line in the past was rising up well over $1,000. So now for the dimension lumber, which is measured in US dollars per thousand board feet, the top of the graph is $700. And for the plywood, which is Canadian dollars per thousand square feet, the top of the graph is $800. So when you look at this, take a close look at the interrelationship between the price changes. So what I was just talking about with that Southern Yellow Pine on the east side, and that's the yellow line. You can see that there was twice it was in April of 2023 and again in August of 2023 where those prices perked up higher than what was happening with the trend line for the main competitors, the pink line Western spruce and the blue line Eastern spruce. Okay, and so then that explains why those prices are correcting down seemingly a little bit more, but only because they rose up higher than the customers were willing to pay. In other terms, these trend lines look a little bit more encouraging than where we were at this time last year, where we have a lot more stability. Keeping in mind, of course, that volumes are not that great, and that's something that I'm going to explain to you right now. Okay, and so I think it's very important to look at the trend lines there that I've just showed you, comparing this year, especially to last year, where the prices now are rising, but really the demand is still quite soft. It's not so much that people are not buying lumber, it's that they're not stocking inventory. And the fear really is that there's going to be some other epic event, some other unforeseen circumstance, which is going to crash the market and bring prices down. And so no one wants to stock inventory the way that they used to in the past, and the retailers would have lumber in their yard, the wholesalers and the reloads would have lumber in their yard, and the sawmills would have lumber in their yard. Sawmills do have lumber, which they are currently selling or have sold, it's just waiting for delivery. So the supply is very, very tight. And this sort of fear of a perception of a possibility of some other issue that's going to bring prices down and people will be stuck holding wood that they paid more for, that they won't be able to sell for that price, especially now as the winter months are going to start being upon us, is causing a little bit of a reverse of that situation where the lack of inventory and the very tight supply in the field is making it possible that if someone does need to order a bunch of wood for some project that they've already planned, they will be caught paying a higher price because the sawmills are keeping their manufacturing volumes down to what the demand is, you see. And so it is not instant for a sawmill to ramp up. Like in the past, sawmills did not necessarily curtail immediately or even shortly after lumber prices started falling. It's very, very expensive to curtail a sawmill, and it's very, very expensive to bring it back online. They call off their loggers. They stop the harvest in the forest, which means also the truck loggers, the truckers are also called off. They put their staff on some kind of either vacation or voluntary taking time off, and they have to bring all of that back, okay? So the one thing that is not a concern is that all of the mills across North America are currently well stocked with logs. So if there was a momentary or a few weeks increase in demand right now, the mills have the logs on hand to manufacture. They just might be a bit of a scramble in terms of getting the staff back 6 days a week, 12-hour days or 18-hour days, whatever it is, 2 shifts, and the truckers. A log truck is not the same as a lumber truck, so that's 2 different operations, okay? So it's quite complicated and tenuous, and everybody just sort of like hoping that nothing will change might not be the best plan. Who knows? Okay, September, there are storms. And in advance of storms, there's demand for plywood specifically to board up windows. And then after storms, there is demand for wood and also, again, panel plywood for, re-roofing and all of these repairs that will need to be done. So it's encouraging that we can see now in hindsight that we've had the bottom of the lumber price and it's coming back up, even within this context of a very, very tight supply-demand balance. So I'll give you some more data right now. Like I said, be sure to come back. In a couple of days, I'll post part 2 of this. And what we have with lumber manufacturing, and this again is from the Western Wood Products Association. They gather data from the industry, they get data from Statistics Canada, and they get data from the US Census. So they've got a real good scope of an overview of what is going on in Canada, US with lumber manufacturing. And we have, for January to June, okay, for the first 6 months of this year, the US West lumber production down 2% from last year, and the US South down 4.1%, which gives the US total lumber manufacturing for the first 6 months of this year at 18.4 billion board feet, which is a 3.2% decrease from last year, for the first 6 months of last year, okay? And in Canada, the decrease in British Columbia, 3.2% down, and in the East, which basically means Quebec, is up 8.8%. So Eastern spruce is taking the place of Western spruce, where the mills in British Columbia have been taking curtailment, and that wood volume is being replaced by Eastern spruce, which brings Canada for the first 6 months of this year at 10.7 billion board feet, which is up 4.6% from the same time last year. Wouldn't expect to hear that, would you? Now, keep in mind that we are in September, and this data is January to June. So as time goes by, I'll be able to give you more of an update about downtime that was taken in July and August in Canada and also US. So the US West capacity utilization rates for the first 6 months of this year are up 1% to 76%, and the US South is down 8% to 78%. These numbers are low, even for the US. Like I said, Canada is optimized to run above 90%. The US, there are a lot more smaller family-owned sawmills that are not as modernized, that haven't been quite as invested, that are not as optimized, and so they will bring that ratio down to below 85%. But if you're talking about the big mills, the large manufacturing companies, the large publicly traded companies and the producers in those states that are competitive, they are also optimized to run probably close to 90% as well. So that brings the total US capacity utilization rate to 77%, which is down 5% from the first 6 months of 2023. BC, currently at 63% capacity utilization rate, which is down 2% from last year, which was down a lot. Like I said, between 80 and 90 is normal for British Columbia. In the East, again, because the reductions in the Pacific Northwest have been offset, is up 6% to 81% capacity utilization rate, which brings Canada to 74% total for the first 6 months of this year, which is up 3% from last year. I know, it's a lot, but there's a lot more. So I'll just leave that there for now. If you like what you see here, subscribe so you will be notified when we make another video. Click like so this awesome content will be suggested to other viewers. And if you need more, because what we put on the website and what I do on YouTube is a small portion. Madison's tracks 500 individual softwood lumber and panel commodity products across North America every Friday since 1952. Okay, I'm the third owner. So if you want to see what else we do and what that price is, in the caption here is a link. You can fill out a form. We'll send you a sample. You will see the list of the commodities we track and what the price is for that week. And we will also send you a Word file, which is the commentary. All of this goes into my dashboard, which my customers can see every week, overnight on Thursday and Friday morning when they log in, after we do another price update. So check back here. Definitely this is part 1. Part 2 is going to show you some of the other important forestry data, which does feed into lumber manufacturing and the sawmilling.